Okay guys, before we get into this video, I just want to say, can you check out my other channel, Suraprawn89717, the link will be in the description. It's gaming, Madden, GTA. Thanks. When I was young, I was placed into a PRU unit. These are small buildings in England that house children with mental, physical and behavioural difficulties, as well as children from care homes. The PRU was located in the industrial warehouse of the section of the city, so it was very isolated and difficult to find for most people. At 13, my mother trusted me enough to start walking. You had to walk through my estate, on a canal, and then walk over a bridge, then an abandoned road and cross a highway, then walk through a bus lane. The abandoned road had green houses towards the middle and several bushes and a small lane, 3 feet below the first lane, hidden from view. I rarely saw people on that road, and when I did, it was every few weeks, and it was usually just a person walking their dog. I had an uncomfortable experience on this road a month prior, so I kept my head down mostly. One day, I saw a younger guy. I found out later he was 15, but he looked a lot older. About 6'3", broad shoulders, in general just a big guy. He smiled at me when we were near the greenhouses, and I smiled back. After we passed, I heard him shouting behind me. I removed my earbuds and turned around and we started walking towards each other. He called me gorgeous and asked for my name. Flattered was not the term I'd use, but I appreciated the comment and started talking to him. Despite being incredibly naive and quite stupid, even I knew I was not to talk to random people in the street. He recognized me and introduced himself, saying he used to go to my school, but was in other classes. He mentioned a couple of our teachers, and I was put to ease. There's a very important thing you should know about this PR unit, is that most kids had no social skills and had been segregated from normal society. We almost nearly all had terrible or not involved parents, so school was the only time we experienced contact with others. I was the only girl in my class for almost 2 years, and also one of the youngest. And most of the boys had no boundaries. Not a single topic was ever forbidden, and our school encouraged us always smile, always be kind and polite. If we did not smile or did not engage well, we were warned. If we acted unpleasantly, it was also not well liked. So within literally moments of us talking, he was asking me questions. Do you have a boyfriend? Have you ever had sex? Do you like this position? Do you shave like this? Now by that point I was getting kind of uncomfortable, but it had been drummed into me to accept everyone, and hey, he was from my school, so I kinda just answered and changed the subject. He kept looking at my chest and giving me the once over. He asked me to meet him at 1 o'clock after school, which I agreed to. He gave me a hug and walked away. I was a little wary of him. I'd heard all kinds of jokes in class, but none of the boys had ever been direct with me. I was not used to being treated like a girl. I was used to being one of the guys who made the jokes and laughed. I got into class and I asked one of the teachers about him. She said he was okay and surprised that he talked to me since he was shy. She encouraged me to see him. Another teacher also mentioned him, saying he was okay, so I decided I would meet him after school. They did mention that if you're a girl, he'd ask you out to date, at least once, so just be warned. We finished school early. He just snuck out of school to come and meet me near the greenhouses. He seemed a little put out that I was still wearing my school uniform and a jumper. The questions started again, but this time it felt different. They were even more personal. I started feeling uncomfortable, but I didn't know what to do. He could tell that I was nervous, and looking back, I think he liked it. At one point, I turned away from him to carry on walking, and he grabbed my hips and lifted me up, which freaked me out. I turned to face him and gave him a little petrified expression. He asked me about kissing, and I said I wasn't interested. He leaned over me and took hold of my shoulders and put his tongue in my mouth. I pushed him back and started feeling freaked out. Once again, I was really naive and not good at expressing how I felt, because it wasn't allowed. I said I wanted to go. He said he wanted me to stay for another 15 minutes or so, and begged me to stay. He kept me talking as we walked. He led me towards the lower lane beside the greenhouses. The conversations were very SFW, and I was so involved in them, I just never noticed where exactly we were walking. He then asked me to perform sex acts on him. I refused repeatedly. He asked me to have sex with him. I said no. He got whiny and sat down, and I felt awkward. I started looking at the path away from him and looking at him, and just gave him a weird knowing look. By that point, I started feeling scared. Like a stupid kid, I went over and hugged him, figuring if I came across nice and stayed for the next 3 minutes, he'd say goodbye. He grabbed my backside and jumped back and said shakily I wanted to go. He said he'd let me go if I performed this act. He'd even lead me deeper into the forest so no one would see. I refused a few times, and he kept watching me closely, and moved in front of the small path, blocking me. He asked if I wanted to see him exposed. I said no. He asked me another couple of times, and I refused. Either way, he ended up flashing me. He smiled when I looked at him in horror. I started crying by this point, and I felt terrified. He said I could go, and I walked past him, and as I was about to go back onto the abandoned road, he shouted at me. When I turned back, he was still exposed and smiling, waved at me. The next day, on my way to school, I noticed something moving in the bushes. It was winter, so I didn't pay much attention, but as I got closer, I noticed him looking at me. I walked to the other side of the road, and carried on walking. He shouted at me, and as I turned around, he was flashing me, asking me if I liked it. When I got to school, I brought it up, saying I felt scared and I didn't know why. Had I done something wrong? They told me that any girl he'd talked to, he'd asked to date. He looked at all the girls, and you couldn't let him sit beside the girls on the classroom couches, because he'd end up cuddling them or touching them. He himself told me that he put his hands up girls' skirts or under the tables during class. He was removed from the PR unit a year or so before due to behavioural issues. I saw him over a year later. He'd lost a ton of weight and was standing at the classroom window watching me. I think one of the teachers ended up going outside telling him to leave.